Thursday mornings in the Lang household followed a sacred ritual of chaos. Cereal bowls clinked against the counter, backpacks burst at the seams with crumpled permission slips, and someone always screamed about mismatched socks. Derek Lang moved through the whirlwind like a man underwater, silent, invisible, unseen but necessary. He poured juice with one hand and signed a field trip form with the other, nodding along as his daughter recited multiplication tables at double speed. The house smelled like burnt toast and vanilla hand soap. The kitchen clock ticked louder than the kids' voices, each second a countdown to carpool. And then, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Derek frowned, wiping his hand on a dish towel before answering. Derek. The voice was sharp, breathless. Jenna. He blinked, surprised. His wife was supposed to be in Boston, attending a 2-day academic panel on literature and social memory. She wasn't due back until Friday night. Yeah, he said cautiously. Everything okay? My purse was stolen, Jenna said quickly. At the hotel, I just noticed it missing. My phone, wallet, everything. Derek's brow furrowed. Wait, how are you calling me? Someone let me borrow their phone. A guy at the concierge desk. Hold on. In the brief pause, Derek heard it. A voice in the background, young, male, and far too familiar. You dropped this. Babe. A laugh. Not Jenna's. The kind of laugh she reserved for someone she didn't have to perform for. There was a scuffle of sound, her voice shushing, hurried movement, and then she came back on, clipped and distant. Anyway, just cancel the cards. I'll deal with the hotel, right, Derek said slowly. Okay. She hung up before he could ask anything else. Derek stood still, phone pressed to his ear even after the call had ended. Around him, the kitchen buzzed on. His son called out, asking if his lunch had a juice box. The dog barked at the doorbell. Life moved forward, as it always did. But something inside Derek had stopped. It wasn't just the word babe. It was the way she said nothing about it, the way she assumed he would. As always, trust her version of events without question, that he would handle the crisis, clean up the mess, and never ask for an explanation. He slid the phone into his pocket and poured cereal for his daughter, like nothing had happened. But everything had. Mini lesson, the power of small shifts. Most betrayals don't start with confessions. They start with tone changes, with subtle omissions, with words like babe in the background of stolen purse calls. In relationships, the shift rarely comes like an explosion. It arrives like a draft under a closed door. You don't see it. You feel it first as doubt, then as knowing. Derek had spent 15 years learning to ignore those drafts. Like many men who pride themselves on being dependable, he believed love was something you proved through sacrifice, not suspicion. But here's the thing. Sacrifice without acknowledgement becomes erasure, and erasure turns loyalty into silence, and silence makes room for someone else's voice to take your place. Derek dropped the kids off at school like he always did, waved goodbye like he always did, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. On the drive to work, he played the call again in his head, not the words but the spaces between them, the sound of fabric rustling, the way her voice shrank, the effortless way she ended the conversation. It wasn't just a stolen purse. It was something else. And for once, Derek Lang wasn't going to look away. By the time he arrived at Millbrook College, the fog had lifted from Derek's mind. The college's ivy-draped buildings stood like monuments to respectability, but now he saw the cracks, the forced smiles, the overly polite greetings from faculty who didn't remember his name. Today, he wouldn't be invisible. Today, he would listen, and tomorrow, maybe he'd know what to do with what he heard. Chapter 1 echoes in the hallway. Millbrook College looked exactly as it always did, like the backdrop of a high-budget film about ambition and quiet scandals. Derek Lang parked in the outer lot, same as every morning, his assigned space long since overtaken by construction contractors and visiting lecturers with more clout. He didn't mind. He never did. That was the thing about men like Derek built to be overlooked. The kind of man who opened doors, fixed errors, and stayed out of the photo at award ceremonies. But this morning, as he crossed the stone walkway toward the administrative building, he wasn't thinking about invisible labor. He was thinking about that voice. "You drop this, babe." It looped through his head like a whisper beneath the wind, soft but persistent. Inside the building, the walls smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and tenured apathy. Derek made his usual rounds, checked budgets, flagged a misplaced invoice from the science department, and sent 3 gentle reminders about overdue accreditation forms. His work was precise, efficient, but it wasn't the kind that earned standing ovations or building dedications. By mid-morning, he took the long way to the English department. He told himself it was routine, just a walk, a breather. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was he needed to see her office. Jenna's office was on the 2nd floor of Mather Hall, a converted mansion that smelled like old paperbacks and ambition. Her door was closed, light off, no jacket on the hook. Her nameplate, Dr. Jenna Lang, Associate Chair of English Literature, gleamed beneath the hallway light. Down the hall, a teaching assistant sat at a cluttered desk, earbuds dangling from one ear. Derek approached casually. "Hey there." Jenna in the TA blinked, pulled out his earbud. No, I think she's still in Boston. Conference, right." Derek nodded. "Right, just checking." He turned to go, but the student spoke again, too quickly. She said she might come back early." Derek paused. "She told you that?" The TA shrugged, uneasy. "Yeah, I mean not directly. Toby said something about it." Toby. The name landed like a dropped coin in a quiet chapel. Derek kept his voice even. "Toby." "Yeah, Toby Miles. He was here earlier. Said he left something in her office." A beat passed. "Funny guy. Funny how, I don't know." The TA fidgeted, just confident. Derek offered a small smile, one he'd practiced for years, reassuring. Forgettable. "Thanks," he said, then walked away. Many lessons suspicion grows in the gaps. In life and in marriage, truth isn't always found in what people say. It's in what they dodge. The delayed eye contact, the fumbled answers, the too casual, "Oh, I don't really know." Suspicion doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It grows like mold, quiet, in the corners. Derek hadn't stormed into Jenna's office. He hadn't raised his voice or punched a wall. That wasn't his way. That was never his way. Instead, he filed it, mentally logged the timeline. Boston, purse stolen, calls from a stranger's phone, Toby at her office before noon. She wasn't supposed to be back yet, but she was, and she hadn't told him. It wasn't the affair that hit first, it was the layers of calculation, the management of perception. Jenna was too intelligent to leave evidence by accident, which meant she didn't see Derek as someone who would notice. That hurt more than the cheating. Back in his own office, Derek opened his inbox. Among the spreadsheets and budget approvals sat a new message. No subject, no sender. Just a single image attachment. He hesitated, then clicked. The image loaded slowly. It showed a dim hotel bar. Jenna was seated at a small table. Across from her, leaning in, was a student, Toby Miles. Athletic, smiling, hand on her wrist. Her expression relaxed, familiar, like this was not new. There were no timestamps, no captions, just visual confirmation of what Derek had suspected since the call. But he didn't react, not with rage, not with despair. He simply stared, absorbed it, then quietly saved the photo into a hidden folder on his drive labeled Policy Review Private. That evening, over dinner, Jenna texted him, "Conference wrapping late. May crash early tonight. Love you." Derek looked at the message for a long moment, then replied, "No problem. Hope it was productive." His fingers moved with eerie steadiness. Then he cleaned the dishes, packed the kids' lunches, and vacuumed the living room before bed, just like always. But inside, something had shifted. As dawn approached the next morning, Derek sat at the edge of his bed, staring out the window. He wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. He was doing something more dangerous. He was paying attention, and when a man like Derek starts noticing things no one else wants, seen, something in the foundation begins to shake. And then the cracks spread. Chapter 2, Shadows Beneath the Ivy. Millbrook College was built to impress. It wore its history like a pressed suit, clean red brick, manicured hedges, banners with Latin slogans. The kind of place that made prospective parents clutch each other's hands and whisper, "This is where our child becomes someone." But Derek Lang had worked here long enough to know ivy climbs over cracks. And lately, the cracks were starting to show. Friday morning arrived with mist and a bone-deep silence. Derek sat in his office on the east side of the administrative building, tucked behind the registrar's wing, a place where documents aged in metal cabinets and staff meetings took place over vending machine coffee. His desk was neat, not because he was compulsive, but because no one left him anything. No thank you notes, no student essays, no overdue memos demanding a signature before Friday. He wasn't faculty, he wasn't flashy, he was function, and that made him powerful in a very specific, very overlooked way, because Derek had access to everything. He logged into the academic record system under his credentials, a back-end view not even most department heads saw. It wasn't glamorous, it was spreadsheets, audit logs, user IDs, metadata, but to a man like Derek, it was scripture. He started with Jenna's course logs. Intro to Narrative Fiction, Section A, Instructor, Doctor, Jenna Lang student, Toby Miles midterm. 52, final grade. Derek blinked once. The system didn't lie, but it could be manipulated. He knew that. Course grades passed through multiple layers of interface instructor input, finalization, administrative approval, but each edit left a fingerprint. He clicked the Change History tab. There it was. Grade adjusted timestamp, April 21, 3:17 p.m. User ID, Jlang 45. It was Jenna's login, and it wasn't just a bump from B to A. She had taken a failing midterm and turned it into a final A. There were no notes attached, no email justifications, no student appeal, just a quiet override. Clean, professional, like it had never happened, except it had. Many lesson systems remember what people try to forget. Institutions like Millbrook survive by pretending integrity is embedded in their marble staircases. But the truth, integrity lives in audit trails, in timestamps, in tiny digital footprints that no one expects you to check. Real-life example. In 2017, a university in the Midwest found itself in national headlines after a whistleblower exposed systemic grade inflation. What cracked the case wasn't a tell-all interview or anonymous tip. It was a forgotten Excel file, a pattern of identical login timestamps used to inflate GPA scores across an entire semester. Systems, like people, try to cover for themselves. But systems are clumsy liars, and Derek was done being blind. He printed the record, quietly, one sheet, folded neatly into a manila envelope and placed in his bottom drawer. Then, for good measure, he reviewed other students in Jenna's class. Nothing unusual. Toby was the outlier, not just in grades but in presence. Late-night logins to Jenna's course portal, meeting room reservations in her wing after hours, a pattern forming, subtle but undeniable. He clicked into Millbrook's internal security access panel. Cameras, entry logs, motion sensors. Most administrators never touched it, but Derek had helped vet the vendor. He knew the blind spots, the filters, the archive structure, footage from Mather Hall. Tuesday, April 21, 8:42 p.m. Grainy hallway footage showed Jenna unlocking her office door. A minute later, Toby entered. They didn't emerge for 2 hours. Derek didn't watch the whole thing. He didn't need to. He already knew what he was looking at. And more importantly, he knew what it meant. This wasn't just betrayal. This was professional misconduct. And Millbrook had policies for that. But Millbrook also had something else, Chairman Walter Bisbee. And if Jenna was being protected, which, given her public standing and donor relationships, was likely, then the rot went deeper than Derek had feared. That evening, Jenna returned home as scheduled. She kissed their daughter on the forehead, hugged their son tight, and acted like nothing was wrong. Later, in bed, she mentioned how exhausting the trip had been. Long panels, endless Q&As, she said, yawning. Derek looked at her hands. No signs of guilt, no twitch of shame, just well-practiced serenity. He said nothing, just turned off the light. But his mind was awake. Saturday morning brought sunshine and the sound of leaf blowers. But Derek wasn't trimming hedges. He was building a case, one file at a time. Because this wasn't just about Jenna. It was about who else knew, and who else was willing to keep it quiet. The next name on his list, Toby Miles. And Toby, unlike Jenna, didn't know how to cover his tracks. Chapter 3, The Student and the Gradebook. Saturday morning opened like a lie, bright, soft, quiet. Birdsong slipped through the cracked kitchen window as Derek poured coffee into a chipped mug that read, "Sure one, Dad, a Father's Day gift from 3 years ago." He stirred in a splash of oat milk, watched it swirl. Then he sat down at the kitchen table, opened his laptop, and stared at Toby Miles' academic profile. Millbrook's internal system cataloged everything: attendance records, advisor notes, grade histories, student conduct flags, even parking violations. Derek read like a man leafing through someone else's diary. Toby Miles Jr., major English literature, minor digital humanities, athletic status none, GPA 3.7 above average, faculty mentor Dr. Jenna Lang. That last line stuck in Derek's throat like a pit. He clicked it. The mentorship record had been entered 5 months ago, signed by Jenna, time-stamped, and approved through the system. Toby's name appeared on a list of accelerated research apprentices, a program reserved for high-achieving seniors and grad students. Toby wasn't either. And there was no attached proposal, no research topic, no grant alignment, nothing but a name on a list and a signature from Jenna. The program came with perk stipends, one-on-one travel funding for conferences, and more importantly, grade leniency under research flexibility clauses. Derek knew he'd helped draft those policies years ago, but now he was seeing the other side of them, the side where privilege and personal relationships blur the line between advancement and favoritism. Mini lesson: how power bends rules in plain sight. People think corruption is a backroom deal in a dark office, but most of the time, it's a checkbox on a digital form. It's a favored student placed on a grant list with no proposal. It's a conference travel expense that doubles as a vacation. It's mentorship titles given in exchange for loyalty or silence. In academia, prestige is currency. And where there's currency, there's laundering. Derek had spent years watching deans overlook things that weren't worth the noise. A male professor getting too close to a student. A research budget overrun for guest lectures that never happened. It always started with a good intention. He's talented, she's under pressure, it's just a one-time thing. But when you bend the rules for one, you teach everyone else how to break them. Derek traced Toby's coursework. Last semester, Jenna's class A. Semester prior, B- in a different English class. Prior to that, mostly C's with a few B's. In isolation, it looked like improvement. In context, it looked like manipulation. He dug deeper, pulled records from the registrar system and matched timestamps from Jenna's portal logins to Toby's meeting reservations at Mather Hall. There were overlaps several. Some were late nights, others were weekends. A few were over holiday breaks, when the building should have been locked. He cross-referenced security access Jenna's ID had swiped in multiple times at odd hours. April 21st, April 26th, May 3rd, each followed by grade modifications or mentorship updates the next morning. It was a pattern, not conclusive proof of an affair, but enough to establish impropriety. Still, Derek wasn't ready to go public. Not yet. Not without one more thing. He emailed the IT department with a simple request. Please confirm whether archived CCTV footage exists for Mather Hall, April 21st, 26, and May 3rd. Specifically, timestamps between 6 p.m. and midnight. This is for internal review and access validation. D. Lang. Then he called in a favor from facilities. Asked about janitorial reports on those nights. One custodian reported seeing a professor and student arguing near the back exit, but didn't file a report because nothing got broken. There it was again. Nothing got broken, so no one said anything. Derek closed his laptop. He had enough now. Not just to confront Jenna, but to expose something bigger. If she had done this for one student, who else? And if the chair knew and protected it, then this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about rot. That night, after dinner, Jenna was cheerful. She wore her hair loose how she used to when they first dated. The kids were giggling over a silly game. From the outside, they looked like a family in a commercial. But Derek couldn't unsee the footage, the log, the falsified mentorship, the names she had overwritten. Long day, she asked. Just watching patterns. Derek replied. She nodded absently and walked upstairs. She didn't ask what he meant, and he didn't explain. By Monday, the email came back from IT. The footage was available, and someone else had already requested it. Derek stared at the requester ID WBSBY1 chairman, Walter Buxby. So he knew, and the fact that he hadn't acted meant he was complicit. The next step wouldn't be about Jenna. It would be about the man behind her, and Derek was ready to look him in the eye. Chapter 4, The Chairman's Smile. The parking garage beneath Millbrook's administrative annex was always cold, unnaturally so. Even in summer, the air hung damp and quiet, the lights flickering overhead like they were embarrassed to be on. Derek Lang had never liked this garage. Too many blind corners, too many secrets. And on this particular Monday morning, too many reasons to walk slower than usual. He just stepped out of his car when the echo of polished shoes reached him, sharp taps against cement, deliberate and without hesitation. Walter Bisbee, chairman of the board, architect of legacy, and, now, fellow ghost hunter. Derek, Bisbee called out, voice warm like whiskey and just as toxic. Derek turned, not surprised. Walter Bisbee was the kind of man who showed up early when it suited him and late when it mattered. His silver hair was combed back in a perfect wave. His custom overcoat hung like a uniform, and his smile. That smile had been charming once. Now it looked borrowed. Didn't expect to see you this early, Bisbee said, stepping forward with a clap on Derek's shoulder. Didn't expect you to request my footage, Derek replied. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of fluorescent light. Bisbee chuckled, low and easy, sharp as ever. Lang, that's what I like about you. Efficient, detail-oriented. He leaned against a cement pillar, pulling out a slim cigar. He didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers, a habit he'd picked up after his third heart stent. You've been digging, Bisbee continued, voice now smooth as silk stretched over steel, into systems that, let's be honest, were never meant for your eyes. Derek said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than a confession. Bisbee gave a slight nod of approval. Smart man. You know how institutions work. We preserve the mission, not the minutia. A few grades adjusted here or there. It's the cost of doing business. These kids, some of them need a little extra help. And your wife, God bless her. She's an asset, brings in donors, wins awards. You think that's something we just throw away? He finally looked Derek in the eyes. Don't be the man who burns down a house because one light bulb flickered. Mini lesson. The language of institutional corruption. There's a universal language to power. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't deny wrongdoing. It redefines it. Instead of cheating, they say strategic flexibility. Instead of cover-up, they say discretion. And instead of corruption, they say protecting the greater good. Real-life example. In 2019, a college admissions scandal shook the nation. Wealthy parents paid hundreds of thousands to get their children into elite schools. Photos were doctored, athletic positions faked, test proctors bribed. And when it all came to light, what did the institutions say? We were misled. We'll review our procedures. Not we knew. We looked away. We liked the money. This is the lie institutions tell to survive. And be spy, he was fluent in it. Derek leaned against the opposite pillar. You saw the footage. He said, you know what Jenna's doing. Beesby nodded. And Anne, you're not going to act. Beesby smiled again, wider this time. Less polished, more teeth. I already have, he said. I contained it. He stepped forward now, close enough for Derek to smell the tobacco and faint mint on his breath. Let me explain how this works. Son, scandal breaks when people push. When janitors file reports. When disgruntled husbands start whispering to HR. But when people stay calm, when people understand the value of keeping things quiet, then we avoid a public mess. Then everyone wins. There was no threat in his tone, just truth, delivered like a memo. But Derek heard it clearly. Stay quiet or we'll ruin you too. Derek didn't flinch. He simply nodded once. Then he said the only thing that mattered. You forgot something. Bisbee raised an eyebrow. Oh, Derek's voice was calm. Even, I'm not afraid of the mess. The silence between them turned brittle. For the first time, Bisbee blinked. Then he smiled, this time without warmth. You've always been a quiet one, he said. No one notices until it's too late. He stepped back into the dim light and walked away, footsteps fading. Derek stayed there another full minute, eyes on the empty hallway where Bisbee had disappeared. Something had shifted. There was no going back. That afternoon, Derek received a manila envelope in his campus mailbox. No return address, no signature. Inside screenshots, emails, a picture of Beesby and a different student one from a harassment complaint buried 2 years ago. It seemed someone else had been paying attention too. The time for watching was over. It was time to act. Chapter 5, Collateral Damage. The envelope sat on Derek's desk like a dare. No stamp, no handwriting, no label. Just a manila folder, thick with the weight of reckoning. He stared at it for nearly a minute before pulling the tab. Inside truth, and not just Jenna's. The first image was grainy but unmistakable. Chairman Walter Bisbee, standing shoulder to shoulder with a student outside the faculty club's side entrance. The timestamp, January 2023. 10:13 p.m. The student's name was Sarah Voss. Derek remembered her vaguely, a sharp, quiet senior who'd filed a Title IX complaint that vanished without explanation. Rumors said it was a misunderstanding. She left campus a month later, mid-semester, due to personal stress. The photo told a different story. The rest of the envelope was worse. Screenshots of emails Bisbee had sent to the Human Resources Director, urging discretion regarding unsubstantiated accusations. Internal memos hinting at donor involvement tied to policy changes. Even a redacted report suggesting Bisbee had offered stipends to faculty spouses in exchange for continued institutional loyalty. There, on page 7, was Jenna's name. She had received a supplemental research grant through Bisbee's discretionary fund. Derek had always thought she earned it. Now he saw it differently. It wasn't a reward, it was hush money. Derek sat back in his chair, stunned not by the scale of the corruption, but by the ease of it. It hadn't required fake IDs or hacked servers, just silence, compliance. A few paper trails erased, and no one questioned the rest. He closed the folder and placed it carefully inside his filing cabinet. Second drawer down beneath expired vendor contracts and outdated staff directories. He would return to it, but first, he had to decide who else needed to see it. That evening, dinner was quiet. The kids chatted about school projects and dodgeball games while Jenna asked questions with polished attention. She was in her element, charming, maternal, professionally distracted, but lovingly present. To anyone else, she was the perfect academic wife. To Derek, she was a fire behind glass, beautiful, controlled, and dangerous if cracked open. He watched her closely. Did she know that someone else had started talking? Did she suspect Derek had gone from hurt to hunting? She didn't show it, and that told him everything. After the kids went to bed, Derek opened his laptop in the study. A blank Word document stared back at him. He began typing slow, methodical, deliberate, not a confession, not a report, a dossier. He compiled every document he had: Toby Miles' grade change logs, Jenna's falsified mentorship record, security footage timestamps, BSB's internal memos, the redacted Title IX report, email metadata showing after-hours edits, the donor list cross-referenced with faculty promotions. It took 4 hours. He didn't rush. This wasn't revenge. This was accounting. Mini lesson: the difference between revenge and exposure. People often confuse revenge with justice, but they're not the same. Revenge is personal. It seeks satisfaction, often by inflicting pain equal to one's own. Justice, or exposure, seeks truth. It doesn't roar. It documents. It proves. It leaves no room for denial. Real-life example. In 2002, investigative reporters exposed a systemic sexual abuse cover-up within a religious institution. Their weapon wasn't anger, it was evidence. Names, documents, dates, timelines. The result: structural overhaul and legal consequences. It wasn't a smear campaign, it was a spreadsheet. Derek encrypted the file, saved it to a thumb drive, then uploaded a backup to a secure cloud account under a private pseudonym. He composed a message to Millbrook's Office of Academic Integrity. Attached is a preliminary compilation of grade tampering, mentorship fraud, and potential violations of Title IX oversight involving both faculty and senior administration. Documents traced through Dr. Jenna Lang and Chairman Walter Beesby. Consider this the start, not the end. Concerned administrator. He didn't sign his name, but they'd know. And when they did, they'd also know they couldn't ignore it. The next morning, Jenna walked into the kitchen wearing a pale blue cardigan Derek had bought her 2 birthdays ago. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, pouring coffee. Derek looked at her over the rim of his mug. "Like a baby," he said. She smiled, kissed his cheek, and said she'd be late that night faculty dinner. Nothing exciting. He nodded, sipped his coffee, and waited. 2 days later, the leak hit campus like a thunderclap. Students flooded social media. Professors huddled behind closed doors. Jenna's name trended on the university's online forum, tagged with words like fraud, scandal, and predator. Derek didn't need to say a word. The dossier spoke for itself, and it was only the beginning. Chapter 6, The Leak. It began with a whisper. Then came the storm. At 9:14 a.m. on a gray Thursday morning, an anonymous email was sent to every faculty and department list: serve at Millbrook College. Subject line: integrity or image decide. Attached a zip file titled Lang B's BY Confidential. Zip inside were 27 pages of compiled evidence, well organized, hyperlinked, and time-stamped. Every line of it backed by documentation. Jenna Lang's grade modifications for Toby Miles. Metadata showing logins outside normal academic hours. Security access logs. The falsified mentorship program. Chairman Beesby's internal email stifling misconduct reports. A note about Sarah Voss's Title IX withdrawal with a single line: still waiting for justice. Within 30 minutes, the file had been downloaded over 300 times. By noon, the student newspaper, the Millbrook Lantern, published a breaking story: exclusive whistleblower exposes academic fraud, corruption at highest levels. They named names. They printed screenshots. They didn't hold back. In the English department lounge, the silence was surgical. Jenna sat at the conference table, hands folded neatly, her phone buzzing nonstop beside her latte. Her face held the kind of stillness that only highly educated people know how to wear, a calm forged by years of public speaking and polite warfare. Around her, colleagues murmured and avoided eye contact. A few of them, the ones who'd always envied her, didn't even try to hide their smirks. Chairman Walter Beesby, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen. He'd called in sick. Back in his office, Derek watched it all unfold like a man monitoring a wildfire he'd intentionally set. He didn't gloat. He didn't flinch. He simply observed. Because in systems like Millbrook, truth didn't cause collapse. Exposure did, and he had chosen his moment well. Mini lesson: why systems fear transparency more than corruption. It's a strange truth. Most institutions can survive corruption. They cannot survive the proof of it. Corruption is internalized, rationalized, written off as a necessary evil. But transparency forces confrontation. It demands questions like, who allowed this? How long did they know? Why didn't they stop it? Real-life example. In 2018, a major tech company faced public outrage when it was revealed they'd covered up sexual misconduct allegations against senior executives for years. The internal culture hadn't changed because of ethics. It changed because the leak triggered protests, walkouts, and shareholder lawsuits. Exposure isn't destruction, it's oxygen. The college president issued a formal statement by 4 p.m. Millbrook College takes these allegations seriously and is initiating a full internal review. Effective immediately, Dr. Jenna Lang is placed on administrative leave. Chairman Beesby has voluntarily stepped back from duties pending investigation. The language was vague, the tone measured, but the damage was done. Social media lit up with screenshots of the leaked folder. Students held impromptu rallies on the quad. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards on accountability isn't optional. The college's pristine reputation bled under the weight of every reshared document. At home, Jenna arrived just before 6 p.m. She dropped her bag in the hallway, eyes sunken but composed. She didn't speak. She didn't accuse. She simply walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the muted television. Derek watched her from the kitchen doorway. She finally asked, "Was it you?" His voice was steady. "Does it matter?" She turned to face him. "It does." He paused. "Then yes." She looked at him for a long time, not with fury but with something worse. Recognition. For the first time in years, Jenna Lang truly saw her husband, not as the errand runner, not as the man who picked up dry cleaning, but as someone who could end her career in a single email. "You've destroyed everything," she whispered. Derek stepped forward, quiet and calm. "No," he said. "You destroyed everything. I just stopped cleaning it up." She blinked, once, then stood and walked upstairs without another word. The house was silent for the rest of the night. Even the children sensed it, asking if mommy was okay, if daddy was angry. Derek said no to both, though the truth was more complex than yes or no could hold. Because this wasn't a fight, this was fallout, and the radiation was just beginning to settle. The following Monday, a campus tribunal was scheduled. Jenna would have to face the committee. Bisbee would be summoned, and Derek had no seat at that table. But he didn't need one. He'd already flipped it. Chapter 7, The Collapse. They gathered in a glass-walled conference room on the third floor of Millbrook Hall, just above the admissions office, a floor designed for transparency, though it rarely delivered any. The Faculty Conduct Review Committee met at 9:00 a.m. sharp. 5 members, 2 of them tenured, 1 external consultant, a student representative, and a compliance officer who looked like she hadn't slept in days. On one side of the table sat Jenna Lang. No makeup, no blazer, just a soft gray sweater that made her look like a woman halfway between penance and protest. She had declined legal representation, insisting she would speak for herself, a statement that once might have earned admiration. Today, it was met with carefully blank stares. On the other side sat a folder, thick, bulging, damning. Label, Lang, Bees by, Review. Internal use only. The meeting was closed to the public, but campus eyes were glued to the outcome. And Derek Lang, he didn't need to be in the room to hear the echoes of it. He was already listening from every hallway conversation, every passing glance, every cautious email tip-off that now made its way to his inbox like tributaries flowing to a delta. The trial had already happened. Today was just the ceremonial burial. The questions came in soft, bureaucratic tones. Can you explain the discrepancy in the mentorship documentation? Do you acknowledge that the grade changes were made without academic committee approval? Why did Mr. Miles receive travel funding for a conference he never registered for? Jenna answered without stammering. Years of academic panels had trained her for precision. It was a mistake. I was under pressure. I believed I was acting within faculty discretion. She never mentioned Toby by name, never said the word affair. But silence, like a skipped line in a poem, speaks volumes. The committee members scribbled notes. Nobody interrupted. Not once. Across campus, Chairman Walter Basby was sitting in his private study, surrounded by oak shelves lined with leather-bound volumes, none of which he'd read in a decade. He had submitted a formal resignation that morning, citing health concerns and a desire to pursue long-postponed family priorities. No one believed a word of it, but the institution accepted it, because sometimes when the foundation is cracked, you remove the top floor and pretend the rest is still structurally sound. Many lesson institutions don't fall. They reshape, contrary to popular belief. Most institutions don't collapse under scandal. They reconfigure. They discard the contaminated limbs to save the body. They issue statements about moving forward. They rename buildings, create new positions, and hire diversity and ethics consultants to repaint the moral walls. Real-life example, after the 2008 financial crisis, multiple banks were exposed for fraud, manipulation, and reckless practices. The response, a handful of resignations, rebranding efforts, and a few fines that were mere slaps on the wrist compared to the billions lost. Nobody called it collapse. They called it recovery. Millbrook wasn't dying. It was rebranding. By mid-afternoon, an internal memo was circulated. The Faculty Conduct Committee has completed its review. Dr. Jenna Lang has chosen to resign her post effective immediately. The college acknowledges her years of service and wishes her the best in future endeavors. There would be no official charges, no formal admissions of guilt, just a quiet exit, a polite closing of doors, and behind them, the scent of rot. That evening, Jenna returned home early. The house was still. The kids were at a friend's birthday party. Derek had made sure of it. She dropped her purse on the entryway table, walked into the kitchen, and leaned against the counter. For a moment, she looked like she might speak. Then she opened the cabinet, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat at the dining table in silence. Derek entered the room moments later. He didn't sit. She finally looked up. "I guess you won," she said. Her voice wasn't bitter, just hollow. Derek leaned against the wall. "I wasn't playing. A beat. Then you destroyed my life." "No," he replied quietly. "You just finally had to live in it." There was no shouting, no tears, just the soft sound of ice cracking in her wine glass. Derek thought of the thousands of moments that had led to this one. The missed dinners, the careful half-truths, the years of being background noise in his own home. He didn't hate her. That would have been easier. He just didn't recognize her anymore. And maybe, he realized, she didn't recognize herself either. Later that night, while she slept on the couch with the TV still glowing, Derek opened his laptop. He had received a new email from a senior lecturer in the philosophy department. Subject, thank you. It was short, just 3 lines. "We all knew. We just didn't think anyone would ever do something about it. You reminded us we're not powerless. Don't let them rewrite the ending." Derek closed the message, sat back, and exhaled. The next morning, Jenna was gone. Her closet half empty. No note, no goodbye, just silence. And Derek. He made breakfast, packed lunches, folded clothes, then walked into a house that felt both freer and infinitely heavier than it had the day before. Because justice has a price, and sometimes it's everything you thought you needed to protect. Chapter 8, A House Half Empty. The house was too quiet, not the comforting kind of quiet like after a snowstorm or when the kids fall asleep early. This was vacancy, a silence that had weight, shape. It echoed differently off walls that had once been filled with bickering over laundry and homework. Jenna's car was gone, her keys too. She had taken the frame photo from their trip to Lisbon, the one she always said captured them best but left the wedding picture on the mantel. She didn't leave a note. That was her style. Even her exits were curated to feel final. Derek stood in the living room with a basket of clean laundry balanced on his hip, looking at the bare nail where the photo used to hang. It was a small thing, but small things build lives. And the removal of them, that's how you know one is ending. He placed the laundry basket down, folded 3 sets of school uniforms, and set them neatly on the stairs for the kids to take up later. It was a Saturday. The sky was pale blue, washed out like a painting left in the sun too long. He made a grocery list, ran the dishwasher, swept the back patio. It all felt mechanical, but not meaningless. Because this is what survival looked like. At noon, he opened his email. There were 4 unread messages, one from the dean's office, formally thanking him for his unofficial support of campus integrity. One from facilities, confirming they'd replaced the nameplate outside Jenna's former office. One from a student, anonymous but heartfelt thank you. We saw what they did to Sarah. No one said anything, but we saw. And one from his daughter's teacher, reminding parents about the spring recital. Life was moving forward, even if the center of it felt scorched. He spent the afternoon doing something he hadn't done in years, cleaning the attic. There, among forgotten boxes and cracked storage bins, he found a dusty notebook, Jenna's, from when they were first married. Inside, her handwriting spilled across the pages poems, half-thoughts, lecture ideas. On one page, she'd written, "I think Derek is the safest person I've ever met. He makes silence feel full instead of frightening." He didn't know what to do with that, so he closed the notebook, placed it back where he found it, and said nothing. Mini lesson. The absence that speaks louder than presence. When people leave emotionally or physically, they don't always slam doors. Sometimes they just stop arriving. A marriage doesn't collapse like a building. It erodes like shoreline, one tide at a time, until the foundation you thought was eternal is suddenly gone, replaced with air and the faint scent of memory. Real-life example. A psychological study on divorce and marital dissatisfaction found that neglect, not conflict, was the biggest predictor of separation. Couples didn't fall apart because they fought. They fell apart because they stopped noticing each other. Jenna's betrayal didn't begin with Toby Miles. It began years ago, when Derek became the background music in his own marriage. That night, after the kids were asleep, Derek stood at the edge of their bed, the one they used to share. He didn't lie in it. He walked into the guest room instead, unfolded a blanket, and settled onto the old pull-out couch. The springs creaked, the ceiling fan ticked, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel something unfamiliar. Relief, not happiness, not closure, just the strange, empty calm that follows truth, even painful truth. The next morning, the kids asked where Mommy was. Derek crouched down, looked them both in the eyes, and said the only thing he could say with complete honesty: "She's not here right now, but I am." They didn't cry. They nodded, and that somehow made it harder. After breakfast, he packed everyone into the car and drove them to the park. They ran across grass that still glistened with dew, played tag, fed ducks, and Derek, sitting on a bench beneath a thinning oak, allowed himself to laugh, just once, just enough. The world had changed. But it hadn't ended. That night, he opened his laptop again, not to check email, not to look at evidence, but to write, not about Jenna, not about Bisbee, but about what comes after justice, after the storm, the story he'd been waiting to live, one about a man no one noticed, until he changed everything. Chapter 9, The Man No One Noticed. Monday morning, new week, new campus bulletin, new rumors already blooming like mold beneath fresh paint. Millbrook College didn't pause for reflection. It repackaged, rebranded, recycled the silence. Derek Lang sat in his new office, moved 3 doors down and up a pay grade. The title on the frosted glass now read, Assistant Vice Provost of Operations and Integrity, a mouthful of bureaucracy designed to sound like progress. He didn't ask for it. They gave it to him, because that's what institutions do when you shine a light into their crawl space. They don't thank you. They promote you. The office was larger, better windows, a view of the quad and the weathered bronze statue of Millbrook's founder, who had once written essays about moral rigor while owning 7 plantations. The irony wasn't lost on Derek. He kept the lights dim, preferred it that way. The brightness made things look too clean. This new office had a single-frame photo on the desk, his kids laughing, mid-movement, unposed. There was no photo of Jenna, and not because of bitterness, but because this space was built for who Derek was becoming, not who he'd been edited into. That morning, a knock at the door. A junior staff member, young and clearly nervous, handed him a stack of departmental budgets. "Thanks, Michelle," Derek said with a small smile. "Don't worry, you're doing fine." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. It was a small moment, but meaningful. People had started to look at him differently, not as the quiet guy in admin, but as the man who ended things others were too afraid to touch. Power. He was learning. Doesn't require volume. Sometimes all it takes is follow-through. Later that day, a professor from the sociology department stopped him in the hallway. "Lang," she said, lowering her voice, "what you did, it meant something. Some of us have been waiting for someone to say enough." Derek nodded politely, but he wasn't interested in applause, because applause fades, and he wasn't done yet. Mini lesson, the unseen power of quiet people. We're taught to equate leadership with charisma, with loud voices, with declarations and grand gestures. But quiet people, those who observe, remember, and move with intention, often wield the sharpest kind of influence. Because when they act, it means something. They weren't performing, they were calculating. Real-life example. In corporate scandals across the last 2 decades from Enron to Theranos, it wasn't always the journalists or watchdogs who broke the silence. Often it was the quietly competent operations manager, the overlooked accountant, the person who noticed numbers didn't add up and refused to look away. Derek Lang was one of those people. He had no podium, he had a paper trail, and that was enough. In the evening, he walked home beneath trees just beginning to hint at spring. The air smelled of damp bark and renewal. The house was different now, quieter, but not broken. His daughter had pinned her recital costume to her door with glittery clothespins. His son had built a Lego model of Daddy's office, complete with a tiny gray-haired minifigure holding a laptop. Derek stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching them from across the hall, and realized something unexpected. He wasn't angry anymore. Not at Jenna, not at Bisbee, not even at himself. He had grieved the version of life he thought he was supposed to have, and now he was ready to build one that actually fit. After the kids went to bed, Derek made tea, sat at the kitchen table, opened his laptop. He wrote, not a report, not an expose, a reflection. The man no one noticed. It wasn't for publication. It wasn't for anyone else. It was for him to make sense of how a man disappears into support roles, how love turns into expectation, how systems reward silence, and how reclaiming your voice doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes It just means refusing to clean up the mess anymore. They didn't see me until I dismantled what they built on my back. But I was always here, watching, remembering, choosing the moment. And when it came, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the floor. Epilogue transition. A new beginning spring came early that year. The campus trees budded with promise. And Derek, for the first time in years, walked across the quad, not as a shadow, but as a man no one would ever overlook again.